I look to value wildlife damage. Some of that's invasive species impacts, some of it's just native wildlife. And then we look at the benefits and costs associated with managing wildlife. And when we're talking about managing wildlife or human-wildlife conflicts, really and truly we're talking about managing humans. Most of our invasive species certainly are from human interactions or human introductions, as opposed to they just come over. So, when we look to value economic impacts, this is a One Health diagram, and usually humans are in the center of this diagram. I don't know if right here in the center. At the National Wildlife Research Center, we changed that up a little bit. We put wildlife in the center because that's the focus of what we're looking at. We look to manage wildlife, we look to estimate their economic impact to all the different spaces around them, to all the different environments around them. My job in particular is to look at the linkages. If wildlife impacts livestock, how do they impact livestock? Is it through disease transmission, depredation? And then what's the economic impact and what sectors are linked to that? It's not just enough anymore to say, we've got some dead cows, and that's the end of the story. Those cows were meant to go somewhere. What's the economic impact to the broader, past the farm gate? How does that impact jobs and revenue and taxes in that region that we're talking about? So this is a big problem. When it comes to feral swine or wild pigs, I'll use those interchangeably. We've got plenty to talk about there because they pretty much impact everything that we care about. I want to provide you some context about what I do so that it's not that I just began working on feral swine or I just began working in invasives. So when I talk about feral swine as being the worst invasive animal that we'll see in our lifetimes, I want you to know I've done a ton of research on other invasive species. And they're either limited by certain things, like our invasive reptiles, like Burmese pythons or the brown tree snake that's represented here. They're limited geographically. Starlings are everywhere, but their ability to cause trouble, to cause damage is limited to a couple of things. We've got birds everywhere. They cause damage, but they can't cause the kind of damage that wild pigs can. And so we'll focus, and you see this map here, that's an outdated map too. They're all outdated because it takes so long to update all of this. And so when I talk about, I'm going to talk about this critter down here in the corner, I want you to understand that their ability to create economic harm is unparalleled in the realm of invasive animals. And so we'll talk about what those impacts look like. Usually when I give this talk, and if I have more time, I like to pose it out to the audience and say, what do you know about it? And if you're from my home state of Texas, you all know a lot, and I can make fun of Texans, so I'll do that now. You got Bubba's got a story. Bubba's definitely got a story. He's got a cousin that you can go hire his helicopter and shoot him from the helicopter. But that's not so much up in this region. Y'all don't have them up here yet, and you definitely don't want them. But everybody usually knows something about them. So when I pose that question to them, they say, oh, they cause some crop damage here and there, or, oh, I've got somebody that lives in the southeastern part of the United States, a friend of mine that hit one with their car once. Again, to impress this upon y'all, feral swine are the worst invasive animals, and I'll categorize why that is. That we'll see here, probably globally. I also like to talk about what kind of damage did they create. People say, oh, they damage this crop or they damage that crop. They damage every single crop. We haven't been able to find one crop in the United States that we grow or that we produce that they cannot damage or that they haven't damaged. If there's a crop that's grown in the region where we have wild pigs, they damage it. I remember being at a place and somebody said, oh, they don't damage cotton. Yeah, they don't eat the cotton, but they like the grubs that grow around the cotton, so they root up the cotton anyway. They damage every single crop that they come in contact with. We don't have another invasive animal that does that. They live anywhere and everywhere. They're not geographically constrained. We have them in Canada. We have them in the southern part of Texas. The saying in Texas is if a sow has 10 piglets, 12 survive. So they can be anywhere, they can eat anything, and they produce like you wouldn't believe. So their ability to create economic harm is unparalleled. And I'm going to bend that for you in what that looks like. How do we manage them? Well, we manage them the best we can. And there's different ways that as we move forward that we're going to have to manage them. My job is to estimate the economic impact of the damage that they create and look at the benefits and costs associated with managing them. This is the most recent map that we have. Looks a little bit different than the map that was presented before because of what it's actually saying, known feral swine populations versus presence, absence. They exist in the southeastern part of the United States and over there in California. The highest density, arguably in the world, is in my home state of Texas. There's a lot of wild pigs there. Across the southeastern part of the United States, they're moving northward. Early in my career, this would be about 10 years ago, I remember asking somebody that worked in the field, well, how fast can a wild pig move? And they're like 55 to 75 miles an hour. And I was like, wow, that's... Human translocation is the main reason that they're moving north. It's not that they're having some normal migration. It's that Bubba in the south of Texas went down to the south of Texas. He lived in the northeastern part of Texas, trapped some pigs out and brought them up closer so he didn't have to drive so far. That's how they spread. So, when we talk about wildlife damage, we bin damage into three major categories: destruction, depredation, and disease transmission. So you're talking about an animal that damages every single crop that we grow in the United States. That's tough, that's a lot. How do you get that data? If you Google, what's the economic estimate of feral swine damage to crops, you're gonna get the research we've done. There is no database on this. We have to go out and collect all this data. Everyone comes and tells us the impacts. Here's a big deal that's going on here or here. It's golf courses, cemeteries, whatever. But we have to go collect the data. It doesn't exist anywhere. That's part of the problem. Documenting damage is one of the big deals associated with this. So we've done studies on golf courses, vehicles, cemeteries, property, you name it. I'll talk briefly about those. Depredation, eating something. Are they eating crops? Are they eating livestock? Are they eating your dog? They can eat them all. So we look to value that. Feral swine depredation on crops is one of our biggest problems in the United States. And then disease transmission. It's truly unparalleled in what they can do. They can take a disease that we probably couldn't have gotten, it's non-zoonotic, and make it so that it is zoonotic. They can take a disease like African swine fever that is moving towards us that we don't want, that will shut down our trade, and make it so it's endemic, and we'll lose billions of dollars. We don't have another invasive animal like that. What I want to impress upon you in all this information that I'm just spewing out to you quickly is I'm talking about the tip of this iceberg. Years ago, there was a study done by a guy that I know, Dave Pimentel, that said estimated damage from wild pigs is about $1.5 billion annually. What that guy did, he was sitting at the bar with his friends, and they said, how many pigs do you think are out there? I don't know, about this many. How many? $200 a year they cause in damage? They did that multiplication, and that's the number I get to live with for the 22 years that I've worked for the USDA. And so when I come out and say that the top of this iceberg here, from what we've just been able to value, is around $3.5 billion, everybody says, man, this is another government program. We've thrown money at this for a decade, and damages have only increased. Yeah, so we didn't have a good estimate going into it. And now I live with that number. Everybody's like, oh, it's about $1.5 billion. It's everywhere in the news. It's not $1.5 billion. It's a lot more. So we've done all sorts of research related to this. These are studies that we have to go out and do. The data doesn't exist. We had a senator on a golf course in Texas. The next week, I was doing a study on golf courses in Texas. It's about $1 million a year to the state of Texas. Feral swine damage to golf courses and cemeteries. Vehicle collisions. If you've ever seen one of these things, you don't want to hit them with your car. And luckily in Texas, they drive a lot of trucks because those things are big. We have estimated from a separate study that vehicle collision repair costs over this time period, which is not that large, not that long. And what you can't see is in this great state of Texas there, during that time period, over $300 million in vehicle collision costs, thanks to wild pigs. The numbers are staggering. This is just one aspect of what they do.